Friends, welcome to Making Disciples. It's so good to be with you. Hey, if it's your first time, warm welcome. If this is your multiple of time, then it's really great to have you with us. Today's episode is going to be an interview, and you'll hear in the interview kind of how this kind of came about. But one of our listeners of the podcast sent me a little message just about one of the particular episodes, and in this, he tells me that he leads wrestling church in a wrestling ring. And his name is Gaz, and he runs an incredible ministry. And you can find it online, gtministries.co.uk, and it's up in Bradford. I know Bradford really well. I did a placement in Bradford when I was training to work for the church. I worked in Bradford at Jessup's photography shop there for a number of years. So know Bradford really well. So when he reached out, I was like, no way, you need to talk to me about this. I love it when people come up with new creative ways of doing and being church and living out God's mission. So often we get boxed in, this is how we do things around here. And sometimes, you come across somebody, you think, this is somebody who's thinking outside of the box. And what really interested me was, so years ago, I used to run a youth congregation off the back of a skate park. Now, as a part of that, I did have a friend at the time who was a wrestler, and he had a wrestling ring, and he brought his wrestling ring to church, and we did basically a wrestling evangelistic thing one evening. It was brilliant. But I've never heard of anybody who does this as a regular thing, church alongside wrestling. So I was like, okay, we gotta hear about this. When you read through the New Testament, you come across people who were just desperate to get the gospel message as far as they could take it. Paul, Peter, the disciples, taking this gospel message as far as they can. Paul says, to the Jew, I'm a Jew, but to the Roman, I'm a Roman. Taking this message as far as I can, I'm going to become all things to all people. And that's what Gaz is doing. He's trying to take something he's passionate about and trying to use it to share this incredible message of Jesus. So I hope you find this interesting and really inspiring, because I wonder how many of us have got ideas of things that we could cook up for new opportunities of reaching people with the gospel. But we think, I can't do that. It doesn't sound very Christian, does it? And I hope this interview with Gaz makes you go, no, actually, what makes it Christian is Jesus. What makes it Christian is that God is using this to reach people. So I just really wonder if this may inspire some of us to think about what you could be doing in terms of mission and reaching people that are into the same stuff that you are into. Yeah. So there you go. So I hope you find this really interesting. Do give Gaz a bit of a like. Do send him a little message if you find this interview inspiring. I'll put his information in the show notes, because I think he needs some encouragement that what he's doing is really exciting, and that there are others who could be doing something like this. So let's jump in an interview with Gaz as we talk about wrestling church. Guys, welcome to Making Disciples. I am so excited to interview you today. Thank you for giving us a bit of your time.
Yeah, no worries. I'm excited for this too. I'm an avid listener of the podcast. So, being able to have a chat with you about all things, what I'm up to, I won't give it away. But yeah, I'm excited, mate. This is going to be good.
So, you messaged me a little while ago going, hi, Chris, Gareth Gaz, and I run a pro wrestling church.
Yeah.
And my response back to you was, dude, I want to interview you.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited. We've never met.
No.
You're a listener, and you reached out, and you just, I was able to go to your website. And do you know what was really exciting for me? You're heading to Castleford in a few weeks with what you do.
I am. Yeah.
I grew up in Normanton, Castleford, and Pontefract.
Come on.
So Castleford is where all my uncle and aunt, aunts would live, or some of my uncle and aunts would live. I went to Ponty College.
Yeah.
Grew up in Normanton. So when I saw Castleford, I was like, okay, right. I got to talk to this guy.
Yeah.
So you run a pro wrestler church.
Yep.
I have to, before I get to ask you why or
Yeah.
how
Okay.
does that work out? I need to ask you, how did you come to faith? What's your
Oh,
story of coming to faith?
oh, dude. So my story of coming to faith is a long one. It's a winding one. I'll give you the shorthand version. So essentially, I grew up in a council estate in Keighley, so not too far away from Castleford. And my dad left when I was a kid. My mum was an alcoholic. I had a rough childhood. I was sexually abused, and I was homeless at 15. And I was living in a skip, and I found myself in a hostel. And while I was living in that hostel, I bumped into a guy who I just happened to get on with, and we played video games and we hung out. And one morning he invited me to church. And I'd been to like a Roman Catholic primary school and secondary school, so I had some experience of church. But when I walked into St. John's, Wakefield Road in Bradford, and it was open seating, there was a live band, I was expecting pews and organs. I was expecting the vicar to shake my hand at the door and that'd be it.
Okay, just back up a second. St.
Go
John's in
on.
Bradford.
Yeah, yeah. Wakefield Road,
So,
Bradford.
yeah, I know it.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, my wife did her. So my wife's ordained, and she did her placement there. So I spent a number of months in Bradford on placement in St John's Barley,
Right, yeah.
but yeah, that's where she was.
Oh,
So I know
amazing.
the church. Yeah,
Okay.
I actually used to work in Bradford. So I used to work at Jessop's in on the high street in
Oh
Bradford.
yeah, I know
So
Jessop's,
I
yeah.
know the area. Anyway,
Yeah.
so you went to church, you
Yes, I
found.
went to church and I was sat second row. I wasn't sat front row, I'm not that kind of guy. But I was sat second row and in the worship, they were singing songs about love, and I found myself bubbling and feeling this emotion that I couldn't contain. And I found myself crying, weeping, sobbing, ugly crying during the worship. And after the service, a guy came over to me and he said, I saw you crying. And I'd had to put a hard face on for most of my life. I had to learn how to scrap as a kid. Me being seen to cry was weakness, and I was not going to ever give that up. So I said, nah, mate, I wasn't crying. And he said, I can tell you why. And that caught my interest. I said, okay, why was I crying then? Go on, humor me. And he goes, oh, you've just felt love for the first time in your life and you didn't know what to do with it. And that hit me square in the heart. It was nail on the head, completely correct. Now I had to wrestle with that and I had to figure that out. And I started attending the church regularly. They did Saturday night worship sessions and services, so I could still go to church on a Saturday and then go out to the pub after and go to my rock and metal bars and whatever, and not have to get up early Sunday morning. But I started feeling that there's something here, that there's something to this that is more than just the hymns and the worship and the service. It's about a way of living. And I went through a pretty horrible breakup with my wife. My grandmother passed away, and I found myself living in a box room with a whole bunch of debt. And I thought I was on the winning team. And as I was trying to wrestle with this stuff, I was very angry at God and retreated a bit. But that's when it completely shifted, because this guy called Dave Kendall came and knocked on my door, busted his way in, and said, I want to help you sort your stuff out. And
Mm.
he discipled me. He journeyed with me. He mentored me over 18 months of me going on a massive journey of forgiveness and unpicking all of my character traits and the history in my past and trying to find peace with it, ownership of it, giving it to God, praying over it. I had a massive conversation with my mum, found my dad. So I've got a relationship with my dad now. I was able to sort things out with my wife at the time, but that ended up still going Pete Tong. And so, I got divorced. I dealt with my debts. So I went to CAP and they helped me with my debts. Amazing organization. And then we got stuck on my abuser. And last I knew, he was in prison because he'd gone to prison for what he did. And Dave said to me, he said, what do you want to do? Like, I don't know, I'm stuck. Well, the first thing we can do is pray. So we prayed together. And I prayed a very simple and bold prayer, which has completely transformed my life. And I just said, God, if you're real, if this is really it, and I'm all in, I need you to help me deal with this. The next day at work, I was working at CEX in Computer Exchange Store in the city centre, so you'll
Yeah,
probably know it. Um,
yeah.
and I was serving on the tills, and my abuser walked in and joined the queue. The next day, the literal next day. And as he comes up the queue, I tried to avoid him. It wasn't happening, and I had to serve him.
Mm.
and I find this part of my journey just so monumental because I served him.
Mm.
And as I gave him his change back, once I put it all through the till, I had this moment where I could hold his hand. And I'd been wrestling training for a little bit. So
Mm.
I had put on a bit of mass. I wasn't a little kid anymore. And I looked him dead in the eyes and I saw fear in his eyes. And I had that same stuff going on for me. And I just felt this is it. This is the moment. I
Yeah.
forgive you for what you did. And I let go of his hand. And I was like, right, God, you've got me. Where do we
Mm.
go from here? And that was then, okay, well, if I'm really going to do this, I need to live for Christ and I need to live in Christ, and that means changing a whole load of stuff, and not all
Mm.
bad, but using any platforms I've got for him, any relationships I have, they need to be good relationships, healthy
Mm.
relationships, and that's a lifelong journey of continual growth and
Mm.
development. But having Dave alongside me and other guys since, I've got multiple mentors now who I go to
Mm.
for stuff. Um, I'm now seeing myself helping other people out of debt,
Mm.
helping other people find work, helping other people deal with their past, and using my
Yeah.
own personal experiences, and that has kind of led me on this leadership journey and this other stuff that's going
Mm.
on, and it's just been a massive groundwork of
Mm.
trauma, yes, but of building and strengthening and experience that I'm able to tap into for
Mm.
God's glory, and for relationships with others to help them find Jesus for
Mm.
themselves. um and that's my story in a
Mm.
nutshell.
Yeah, wow. I mean, there's so much there, and there's a little bit of it. I don't want to rush past because I think there'll be people listening who'll go, "Hang on, something of that connected with me." But you talk about the abuse.
Mm.
When was that? How many years ago when you actually saw the guy in the
That
shop and you
was maybe 2013, 2014. Um,
approaching 10 years?
yeah. I was 8 years old when it happened. He was an
Yeah.
older relative, um, and it happened over a year. And it took me a long time to kind of even figure out that it was wrong before I
Yeah.
eventually told my mum. Um,
Yeah.
and the thing for me was that when I look back at that, there's guys I meet now who are in their 40s, in their 50s, in
Ah.
their 60s even, who have had stuff like this happen to them
Mm.
in their childhood. And, I know plenty of women have suffered through it too.
Mm.
Um, but there's just something for men, and I've got a real heart for men's ministry. There's just something for men in this that is so damaging
Mm.
as a boy and as a young man to have that happen to you, and for it to it breaks you. um
Mm.
and I know it definitely sent me off on a completely different path. um
Mm.
all the stuff I'm talking about, like having to put a mask on and be strong, was because in those moments I felt absolutely vulnerable and weak and just crushed. So when I get older and I'm like, you know what, actually I can put a bit of weight on, I can throw my weight about, I can get in a fight and a scrap, no one's going to do that to me again, like that completely changed my
Mm.
life trajectory. Um, but I think it's such a big issue, for men, that I think it is very rarely talked about, um, openly. So
Yeah, I would say if there's if anybody's listening and that's really struck a chord with them, who just on a kind of side note, who would who would you say go to speak to if that already has
mm.
gone, wow, that's me. Who would you recommend people approaching?
I think it totally depends on their setting, I guess, because there is very little support for it, secular and Christian.
Mm.
I would say, find another guy who you trust,
Mm.
that you can talk that through. It might be your church leader. It might be, one of the old dogs at church who's coming alongside you, or someone that you can trust being
Mm.
vulnerable with, and journey that out together. The main thing I found was I'm not expecting anybody to be able to have a moment like I had. That was
Mm.
clearly a work of God,
Yeah.
and miraculous. And not everyone could deal with that, I'm sure. But what I would say is that, prayer and forgiving of yourself for what it's done to you, and yes, forgiving of them if you can.
Mm.
But it's taking ownership of it, and
Mm.
moving from a victim mentality to a victory mentality over that
Mm.
particular issue in your life.
Yeah.
Because for men, man, it's just you
Mm.
need to own it, and you need to say
Yeah.
not anymore. this will not affect my relationships, my marriage, my sexual
Yeah.
desires, or whatever it's done to you,
Yeah.
and let Jesus come in and take victory over it. And
Mm.
then be able to walk in strength. I wish there were more support. Hey, maybe I
Yeah.
might need to set some up. I don't know, but um,
Mm.
I wish there were more support for that stuff. But get to
Yeah.
Andy's Man Club is probably a good place to go to. They're great peer support groups. If you've got a local Christian Vision for men's group that you can
Mm.
attend, that might be helpful. Um,
Yeah.
you might find it easier to share with a stranger, than you
The key
might.
thing is opening the windows, isn't it? Letting the light in to
Yeah,
whoever you trust,
yeah,
and then kind of taking it from there and having wise people
mm,
counsel you through it and support you through it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Let's carry on because we're here to talk about wrestling.
yeah. Yeah.
I want to know, why did you start doing? Well, how did you first bring wrestling and church together? How did those two things add up?
Yeah. So if I were to put it simply, wrestling is storytelling. That's the way I look at it. Wrestling is storytelling. There's characters, there's good, there's evil. It's storytelling. When you read the Bible and you go, David and Goliath, what would that look like in modern day? It probably would happen at a WWE wrestling event, or UFC or something like that. What would Cain and Abel look like today? What would Jacob wrestling God look like today? There's just so many stories in the Bible that when I became a professional wrestler and I was journeying up and down the country doing this, I was like looking in the Bible and going, "Oh, I could do that story as a match this weekend," and
Yeah.
and my opponent isn't Christian, is none the wiser, but I come in with this great idea of a story and how we can flesh it all out, and they're like, "Oh, that's some great creative," and I'm like, "I just read it in the Bible," and I just I felt challenged that any platform I had to be for Christ, and
Mm.
I tried my best to portray that through my character. Gareth Angel is my ring name, and so I've got I quote scripture in my promos. I'll have scripture taped on my wrist. My shirt says "Pray, eat, wrestle, repeat," and my fans are called the Angel Army and all this stuff. So I was like subtly bringing all this stuff in that kind of culminated in this Christian good guy who fought for hope, justice, and a good way of living and fighting all these villains. And then I went to New Wine Festival. I go there quite regularly, the conference, and I saw the Tough Talk guys. I don't know if you've met them before. That do powerlifting, and I saw them do their thing. And afterwards, I just thought, what they've done there is really, really special. The hook is the powerlifting. The hook is the
Mm.
weightlifting. You've come for that, and then they've just shared their story with you. So I was like, if I put on my own wrestling show, the hook is the wrestling, but then I can put my own personal testimony smack bang in the middle of it. And I know it will confront people with the
Mm.
challenge of faith. And if I control the content, then why not?
Yeah.
And so that's where my ministry was born from. And we tested it at a few churches that I was connected through with CAP because I was working for CAP at the time. And we started seeing hundreds of people come in. And then people making responses and wanting to go on alpha and stuff. And I was like, okay, we've got something here. And then that grew into, let's set up a training school. So we set up a training school at Fountains Church in Bradford with Linda Maslin. You know Linda.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and that grew into, okay, we've got like 12, 15 students coming every week now that we're doing life with. And a few of these guys are going on faith journeys and they're talking to me. The coach relationship is there immediately,
Mm.
sharing faith. They want to get baptized. Okay, let's do wrestling church and throw some baptisms in, and let's get a worship band in that's a little bit more punk rock, a bit more heavy
Mm.
metal, and just kind of just yeah, let's just glam it up a bit and kind of be like, right, let's do church, and then that's kind of where the idea was born from. And then again, we had 150, 200 people attend, primarily non-Christian, and
Wow.
we built it up over I would say best part of half a year of all these regular wrestling events that built these characters that they all wanted to come and see. And then we're like, right, let's put the big fight on at Wrestling Church. Everyone comes to that. We kind of
Mm.
we'd earned the respect of the people who came. They loved what we were doing, and it was almost like we'd kind of earned the right to share our faith with them as a group.
Mm.
and they then embrace that, and they embrace the reality of it, and the fact that we're just real people, everyday people. We just happen to be
Yeah.
big sweaty men slapping each other about for a bit. Um,
I'm grinning away because in 2002, I planted a church in a skate park,
cool.
and a mate of mine called Brett Summers had a ring. This is in Birmingham.
Yeah.
And I said, look, I want to somehow do some events at our skate park that will gather kids and be able to share good news with them and another. Do you fancy bringing your wrestling ring down, some of your guys? And I'd love to interview you right in the middle and tell everybody your testimony. So they brought the wrestling ring in, and we had 150 kids, something like that. And we had an amazing night. Brett shared his testimony. And it was such an awesome way of dismantling this prim and proper Christianity and actually really just did something really real. I'm
Mm.
also grinning because I want to share this with you. So I've been doing some research recently about church planting and different kinds of churches being planted. That's why I'm excited about what you're doing. Get this, right? So in 1884, this is no more than a mile and a half down the road from me, okay? In
Right.
1884, there was Father Arthur Osborne Montgomery. J. What an amazing
What a
name.
name. That's great.
Father Arthur Osborne Montgomery J. And he had a church building. It didn't exist anymore. It was bombed in the war, but it was called Holy Trinity Shoreditch. And he planted a church in a boxing ring in his church. He put a boxing ring in the church
Yep.
and a church from the boxing ring. So the sermons were from the boxing ring, and they'd have boxing match and he'd preach.
Come on.
Yeah, this is the bit. I love this. His church members were called Jack the Bender, Scrappy, Donkey, and Tommy the Irishman.
Wow. What a motley crew. I love it.
I love it. So good. And he had a church in a boxing ring. And I just think that is so much fun. I'm like, come on, that is brilliant.
Yeah.
So I love what you're doing. And I love that we tried this, we tried that, and this kind of happened. So we thought we'd do this. And I love that experimental. Just give it a go and see what happens. And you don't know where the spirit might lead.
Yeah, and that's what we've seen is that we're learning as we go, certainly. And I'm just on the cusp of setting up my own charity to duplicate it, because I think it's just such a good model that we've got now, that we could take it to other places and partner with other churches that have a heart for that community. And we've had to make some changes as we went during the World Cup recently. England and France got to the semis, and obviously the quarterfinals. Anyway, whatever game it was, that event landed on an event that we'd already booked. So we were like, you know what, we need to move wrestling church early because the community of people that we're reaching, they may very well go watch England versus France in the World Cup rather than come to wrestling church that evening. And there were a few guys that we were going to get baptized, and I just had to double check, hey, I know England, France are playing. Can you come earlier? And the team that we had is quite a young team, not a lot of experience working with very poor and broken people from the working class and council estates. So, there was a shift in thinking that had to happen there as well. Myself and Linda have been working with people like this for years, so we kind of understand the group. But the wrestling crowd in itself is a whole other culture. Linda Maslin even got in the ring and wrestled a match. Like, we trained her and got her in the ring and wrestled a match, because again, we had to position Linda as a character within that group so that they would trust what she said. Like, I couldn't personally then become a bad guy in this setting, because if I'm the guy who they're all looking up to as a leader, as an ambassador for Christ, I can't then go around, smacking old ladies with metal chairs. Like, that's just not going to work. But we can tell those stories of villains coming in. And one great story, which I'd love to share with you real quick, is a young guy called Jack. I met Jack at a wrestling show in Blackburn, Darwin even, I would say maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And he was a completely different character then, really young. Got in the ring with him, felt him out, and I was like, you know what, this kid's really good. Then COVID happened and a few other different things. And when we got this going, I immediately said to Jack, I was like, I want you on my team. He's not a Christian. I want you on my team because he's a great talker, and he's from a council estate. He's from Salford. And I was like, me and you opposite each other. I've gone down one path and I found faith in Christ. You've gone down another path. He'd been in prison. He had some issues with drugs and stuff. He's very honest about his story and his journey. But we had these polar opposite characters. And over the year, we built this idea that Jack underhanded tricks. You know, he got in Linda's face. He upset the crowd. He did the whole the villainous stuff. Won the world title, and come to this final rematch with me and him like a whole year later, where we did like the whole I won the Rumble match and got to have a WrestleMania. And we had a big fight, and I won the title back. And then he got angry at Linda and blamed Linda. Then Linda beat him, and then he had this rock bottom moment. And the stipulation for the match with Linda was, if I beat you, you need to start reading your Bible and come to a Bible class. Because he'd actually made a journey of faith during that whole time. His mother had passed away, unfortunately, and our personal relationship between myself and Jack had grown to a point where I was able to share faith with him. So he'd gone on that journey and he'd come to Christ, and he was still a bad guy. And we were like, right, we need to turn you good at some point, because you know you want to make this change, but you want to be baptized at wrestling church. He's like, you've helped him in my faith journey, and I don't want anybody other than you baptizing me. And I was like, that makes perfect sense. I completely understand. So he was like, we need to wait until we can do that. And so we delayed it and we turned him good. And now the whole crowd, like, they're chanting for Salford. Whereas before, whenever he came out, they'd be chanting for Bradford. They're very fickle people. But he's now, you know, he's now sharing his faith. He's now going to a church in Salford. He's now being completely open and honest about his journey and what Christ has done for him in his life and his whole change of thinking. And he's like one of those guys I look at and I go, this is why we've done this. You know, I'm not just bringing the crowd and the people who come into this so that they can hear about Jesus, but even the wrestlers themselves are being affected by the relationships and the, you know, I think discipleship starts long before the decision. And I think, you know, for him, that was certainly the case. And so, you know, if I'm going to plant a church in Salford, a wrestling church in Salford, he'd be my man there. You know, he'd be my equivalent in Salford. He's from that community. He understands the people. He can speak from real experience. He's been on a faith journey. He knows Christ. Like, he'd be perfect. And so for me, I'm like, that's just so cool. Like, you know, this motley crew of wrestlers who just want to share Jesus. And I'm like, come on. Yeah.
I love that. I was going to actually ask you to tell us some stories. So I love the fact you've started with that one. Now, that's a big win, isn't it? That's somebody who's come to faith. I mean, do you have any small testimony, any little stories that are just signs of hope, or things that have just, you know, sometimes with me, the person's not come to faith yet, but he has just took a Bible off me. And that is like the big win. Come on, he's took a Bible.
Yeah.
You know, that's a massive leap. You know, do you have any other just little stories? Good.
I've got a few.
Stories?
Yeah. So there's a woman who comes every show, and she always brings her camera phone with her, and she's always taking videos and photos, and she posts them on her Instagram. And you know, she's called Amanda. She's great, and she came to me at the last show afterwards, and she goes, you know, Gaz, what you should do is you should take all your little talks and you should put them together on a DVD. She's a bit older. I'm not going to take a guess at her age. That's not fair, but she's a bit older than me. And I was like, oh, yeah, well, they're all on the YouTube channel. You can check them out. She's like, no, can you put them on a DVD for me so I can watch them all back? I'm really inspired by you. I love your stories. And I'm like, oh, you mean the preachers? No, yeah, your stories are great. I always come away feeling more encouraged and more kind of like I can tackle the next month. And I'm like, oh, come on, like, that's amazing. And then just being able to say to her, like, you know, these stories, they're like, this is what Jesus has done for me. And like, you know, is this what you're hearing? She's like, yeah. I'm so encouraged and inspired. And I'm just kind of like, she's on her way. She's on her way. Like, she's hearing this. She's embracing it. She wants to own it. You know, she's like, can you put it on a DVD for me? Because it's doing something for her. And I'm like, come on, I just want to, okay, yes, it's me doing it, but I'm only doing it through Christ. And I try to keep pointing back to Jesus, but she's certainly on her way. And actually, just another little quick one was, there's a young guy who comes to all the training sessions, and he was featured in the BBC documentary that we were on, which is still on iPlayer if you want to check it out. Bradford Church of Wrestling, cheeky little plug. And me and him were doing the rounds, so we got on BBC Look North and BBC Radio Leeds and stuff when the documentary went out. And he's from the LGBTQ plus community, and he's asexual, and his character is Pride. And he said to me when he first came on, he was like, everywhere I've gone to train to wrestle, and I've pitched this character, they've told me I need to be a bad guy. And I was like, interesting, because he's working in like working men's clubs, and most
Mm,
of these towns, it was like if he came out, he'd just get booed out of the building.
mm,
And he was like, everyone tells me I need to be a bad guy, and I'm like, well, I don't think we need to do that. I think we could package you as a good guy if we package you well. And
mm,
he's not, he's working matches. He's not quite there yet, but he's on his way. And me and him was sat in the green room at Look North, and he goes, "So, can you tell me where this double cloth thing comes from? Then I've heard like I can't wear double cloths if I'm a Christian." I was like, "What do you mean? Where have you got that from?" And he was like, "Mixed fabrics. It's in the Bible somewhere." I mean, oh, Leviticus. Oh, okay. Let's talk about Leviticus. And so me and him are sat there in the green room, just about to go on BBC Look North. I'm in my suit. He's like half in his like wrestling gear and stuff. And he's like, yeah, let's talk about Leviticus. So we're just chewing it over. Now he's not. He wouldn't say he's Christian, but he certainly had. And he even said this on a Q&A we did after. He even said that like his perception of church and Christianity has been completely shattered because he expected to come into church as he is, and for him to be completely lambasted and excluded, when
mm,
actually he's been embraced and he's been loved on, and he's like, you guys have done nothing but support me. And so it's now challenging his thinking of church and Christianity and Christians in
mm,
general, which is hopefully then going to shift his thinking on who Jesus was and who Jesus is. um
mm.
and so that again, that's just another one of those
I love that.
journeys.
It's just the small wins, isn't it? When you're doing mission, you just want to have those little wins. And I know when we were in the skate park, it was just the small conversations. It was the hopeful moments where you're like, "Yes, I think I've got you.
Yeah.
I've got you." Um, if somebody's listening and they're thinking to themselves, how the heck can you do church in a wrestling club? I just want to say, Jesus says, the Spirit of God falls on us, and we will be his witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. The Spirit of God pushes us to take the church, the mission, and the message of Jesus further and further into the places that we wouldn't imagine it. If somebody has a little bright idea, listen to this episode. You know what? I do this crazy odd little thing. Could I do it for Jesus?
Mm.
What would you say to them?
I say, of course you can. Go for it. Who would have thought that powerlifters could do it? Who would have thought that comedians could do it? Who would have thought, that some guy might just write a men's magazine and want to put Jesus all in it, like my mate Steve Legg,
Yeah.
Assorted Men's Mag. Like, if the idea's there and you want to put Jesus front and center, so long as Jesus is front and center, I don't think you can really go too far wrong. And who knows the group that you're going to reach. Like, I know for a fact there are guys and girls who come to our wrestling events and to our school who never would have walked in church if it wasn't for that existing. Who are you going to reach with whatever it is that you're doing that is not being reached by the church?
Yeah.
That's mission field.
Yeah.
That is you being a witness in those areas where the
Mm,
church isn't. If that's what's going to happen, and if you feel totally equipped, even if you don't feel equipped, get equipped and just get
mm,
on with it. Like, we need more gospel entrepreneurs.
yeah.
We need more people just thinking outside the box, doing things differently, because we all see the numbers. They say the church is on decline. Yes, maybe the church is in decline as to people in church buildings who are being registered in church buildings, but I can tell you the church is alive and thriving in
Yeah.
all these other
Amen.
different communities, and that's where it's moved to. It's not big old buildings. It's little home churches. It's guys meeting at the pub and chewing over life over a beer and some pot scratchings. It's a wrestling club. It's a boxing club. It's wherever.
Yeah.
That's where the church is thriving, and that's where
Yeah.
Christians are coming alive again for seeing people saved.
Mission on the front line.
Yeah.
No, if anybody wants to find out just a little bit more about what you're doing, what's the website?
So it's GT Ministries, Gin and Tonic Ministries, .co.uk. We're on all
Amazing.
the social media, GT Ministries UK. You can find us on Facebook, TikTok, all the rest of it. And if you search for Gareth Angel Thompson, you'll find me pretty quickly. Yeah.
We'll put some links in the show notes. We'll put a link to, I don't know how long that BBC iPlayer documentary will be out, but
It's up until October, I think. Yeah.
October. We'll link that as well so people can watch that, because that is really good fun as well. I am thoroughly excited to meet you. I'm thoroughly excited that I know some of the places that you're talking about. It's where I grew up. It's where
Yeah.
my heart is. I'm a missionary to the South. God sent me to the South. as a missionary, and I love hearing what the Lord is doing, almost like back home.
Yeah,
I can't wait to say to my mum and dad, "Gotta listen to this episode." You've
yeah,
got to
yeah.
listen. You'll love
Hey, get them along to the show.
it. I can't see Mavis wrestling, but
She'd have to get in the ring. She could sit front row with a handbag at World of
I
Sport
love
Days
it.
and crack someone. You know, she
Oh,
could do that.
I love it. Gareth, thank you so much for your time. I am just so encouraged by what you're doing, and I can't wait to watch and kind of track with you and just see how it develops, because you just said it right, we need some gospel entrepreneurs. We need to be pioneering different forms of church for different forms of people. It's what we need to be doing. It's missional, and it's exactly where Jesus would be. So
Totally.
I am so excited to see kind of where this heads. Planting missional wrestling churches around that'd be such an incredible. Why can't churches use their church halls in this way?
I know, right? This is a no-brainer,
Yeah.
And I mean, to get into the technicalities of it, you set up a wrestling school, you've got a ring in there. Like, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to come to you as a church leader and go, hey, look, I'm going to bring a wrestling ring and a bunch of wrestlers. Let's reach that community together, and grow a team from within your church to be able to minister to them and disciple them. But let's do it together, and let's reach that community group, because they're not being reached, and the people are coming to me from all over the country to come to Bradford to do this. And I've wrestled in Stockton, and I've wrestled in Castleford, and I've wrestled in Pontefract and Wakefield and Huddersfield. I've wrestled down south, and I've been to Gloucester. I've been all over. There are groups of wrestling fans all over the country that would come to a show, and then let's just hit them with Jesus and let him do the rest.
I love it.
Hey,
thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing what happens next.
Yeah, mate. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Grace and peace.
You too, mate.